I'm going to select my top 10 units in Medieval Field of Glory 2. So this is just my opinion. I've played it a fair bit. I've been in the league this season. We've got the new DLC coming, so this is just at the moment the base game, but there are some neat units and I'm going to go through some of them, and we are going to start at number 10 with these wonderful units, the Eisman. So the Scottish lists have some good units. They've also got Highlanders, which almost made my list. And these units are heavy infantry. They only cost 39, so that's pretty cheap, and they've got a heavy weapon. Now the heavy weapon negates armor advantage, so if you're fighting against armored spearmen, the defensive kind costs 42, offensive kind costs 48. You're going to do well. Even the higher end units, Huskars and Knights, the heavy weapon will negate up to 50% advantage of the armor. So at 39, if you can match some of these units up against armored units, that is a good use of your resources. So these units come in highly, and they're at number 10, the Eisman. Good, and also we've got a nice mix in the Scottish list. You've got some spearmen, you've got the cheaper units, Irish foot, medium foot. You've got a nice selection of infantry, maybe not cavalry, but certainly infantry. You've got offensive spear, a nice mix, and the Highlanders, who obviously they've got bows. So mixed in, I think they're a really good unit and a worthy choice. They almost didn't make it, to be honest with you, because it was really quite hard to come up with a top 10. But overall, I think the other thing about them I really like is they're kind of a unique unit, and I think we need more of these in this game. There's quite a lot of generic units like spearmen, you know, offensive spear, defensive spear, medium foot. We need a few more unique, what I would call unique units, and these units with the heavy weapon, the two-handed axe, is a unique unit. So there we go. That's the Eisman at number 10. Do you agree? Leave comments below. And here we are at 9, and we are also going to do 8. And at 9 we have the Galwegian foot. Now these units are very reasonable. They're 33, so they're very, very cheap, and they're impact foot. Now impact foot in this game is a really good attribute. You get the advantage on impact. Quite often you can disrupt, and if you disrupt a unit, then you have the advantage. So for the price, 33, they're a great buy. And mixed in with your spear and Highlanders and then some bowmen, a bit of cav, Eisman, they're just a really good buy. They have to make my top 10, and they come in at 9. Yes, they are lightly protected, so you need to be careful against skirmishers. You know, advance with some heavy infantry mixed in. and they can do some damage. So I think they're worthy inclusion on my list at 9. Very cheap and useful. At 8, I actually had the Low Country Spear, but this is essentially the same unit, the Scottish Spear. As I said before when I was doing the Eisman, what I like about these units is they're kind of unique. Deeper ranked, got 3 ranks instead of just 2, so you're going to get the strength modifier. Offensive Spearmen, large offensive Spearmen units, so they're going to hold the line for quite a while, more often than not. So at 54, these units are, and they look great, don't they, with their really long spear. These units are well worth buying, I would say. So you get access to them in the Low Countries lists and the Scottish lists, and they'll do a decent job, I would say. So I think they're one of my favorite units, and they're at 8. I think they're well placed. Yeah, they're not armored, but because of the size of the unit, I think that makes up for it. At number 7, we have the Camel Lancers. Now these units, I've played against this kind of army in the league, and they are an absolute nightmare. I mean, if you look how many Camel Lancers I can bring, I mean, you know, for the price, they're 46, a little bit more expensive than some like light Lancer Cav, but I mean, I've got so many. When you're fighting out, as an example, this is just a random selection of the Aragonese army, and they've just got standard kind of infantry and some crossbowmen. But if you look how many camel lancers I can bring, they can lock down a lot of units. They're so bouncy because they're lancers. They keep bouncing all the time, so that means they'll get their impact on charging. You can bring a fair bit of infantry with these kind of Arab desert army lists, and then with the camels, it's just a bit of a nightmare facing them with essentially mostly infantry. Yeah, I've got some knights, but you know, you've just got so many of them. You get the bonus fighting horses as well, because they'll disorder cavalry adjacent units. They look neat, they look great, but they are tough to fight. So worthy addition to my list at 7. They might even, as I play the game more, they might even go higher, because I think at 30, I think they're a little bit underpriced. Maybe they should be around 50, 48, 50. They're 46 at the moment. Above average quality protected lancers, camels, I think that's a potent mix. So they are number 7. At number 6, the Javelin Horse. And some of you might be surprised at this selection, but in my opinion, the light Javelin Horse are a really, really good unit, and I'm going to explain why. I mean, number one, they're very cheap. They only cost 24. They're great from mid-game on because they can come around the back of the lines. They can charge into disrupted and fragmented units and break them. I've seen that happen on numerous occasions. They can support cavalry. You know, if I'm up against, say, 2 cav units here with just these 2 units supporting, they can charge into something, stop it gaining zone of control, bounce off cav. I mean, they just chase after skirmishers. That really multi-dimensional unit. Yeah, you can scout with them. You can threaten flanks, chase skirmishers, support cav. They just do everything, and they're just, maybe a lot of players don't use them so much, and they should, because in my opinion they're one of the best units in the game. And really, I mean, they should be top 5 actually, probably, but anyway, they're at 6 in my list as things stand. But you know, some of the units that I've talked about, like the Eisman, Scottish Spear and stuff, that they're quite unique units, so that you don't see them that much. You know, those large, heavy infantry spear units are only in a few lists. The Eisman are really only in the Scottish lists, but these Javelin Horse are in many lists. So you've often got the opportunity to use them, and you often see them on the battlefield. So they're really a good unit to use when you're selecting your units. I also think that more than one, I mean, one is a little bit wasted, but I think if you've got, you know, I've seen players when they've got 3 or 4 Javelin Horse all together, and that's a bit of a nightmare to fight, because, you know, with their javelins, they can disrupt cav very easily, especially if there's 2, 3, 4 units. So they're a real menace. And you know, they often, you have to turn, you know, if they come around the back of an army, you have to turn units to face them to stop them continually charging in the rear. So you're wasting resources because they only cost 24. Most units are going to cost more than that, so you're gaining an advantage there. So really good unit. I think they're great, and let me know what you think. But they are at number 6. At number 5, maybe some of you will laugh, maybe you won't agree with me, but I am going to put Raw Spearmen at number 5, and I'm going to explain a little bit why. I think at 24 they are a bargain. They're defensive spear. Yes, quality is raw, but they're protected. They, bulking out an army, mix them in with heavy infantry. They are a really good unit, and I've seen them even up against knights, to be honest, especially once the knights start losing men from mid-game on. They can really do a job because they're still spearmen. Get that plus 100. Yes, if they lose melees and their quality is only raw, then that's a problem, but overall they just, more often than not, they do a good job, because when you're only paying 24 for a unit, you're not going to rely on it, but you're going to ask it to hold against a more expensive unit for a certain amount of time, and more often than not they do. So for me, they're one of my favorite units to use. Value for money is excellent, and I always, in my armies, I always bring them along. I usually have, I don't know, most of the time 5 or 6 of them. Mix them in, don't put them all together, mix them in with better units, and you use them to cover flanks, and often against a lot of cavalry they'll hold and do a decent job. So I think that they're a very good buy, and they are number 5. Number 3, Crossbowmen. In my opinion, overall for their cost, they're 39. What they can do in the battle, they can hold against infantry, even because they're swordsmen as well as crossbowmen. So that's an advantage over the bowmen. And I think I've got like a bowman unit here. The Welsh bow. Well, the Welsh bow actually they probably cost a little bit too much, but they're just bowmen, unprotected armor, whereas the crossbowmen protected and swordsmen. So they are excellent. If you've got a few of them in combination with your skirmishers, you can disrupt units. They're great against armor, the crossbows, as they were historically. They're just, you can use them in lots of ways, really. They can hold a position, they can do well against cavalry, do well against armor. If you need them to bulk out a line, especially once you're engaged, they can, compared to bowmen, they can actually do a job because they're swordsmen. They can go in and they wouldn't do so badly against your defensive spear or raw spear or medium foot. They're going to do quite well even. So they are a great buy, and usually I max out on them. You can usually get 5 or 6 depending on the list, but they are really, really good. A good unit, and kind of unique, one of the unique units compared to ancients as well, because before we only had bowmen, mass bowmen, but now we've got crossbowmen, and they're one of my favorite units and well worthy of being in the top 3. At number 2, actually at number 2, I've kind of got a few units that are all fairly similar, and that's the light lancers, really. Example being Muslim lancers. They only cost 39, so they're pretty cheap, but they're lancers, above average quality, protected. They are a really, really good buy, and if you've got the option to take them, then I would, because they'll get their bonus from having lancers, above average quality, which is great in melee and for the cohesion checks. They can move around, they can lock cav down, they're fast. They are just a great unit, well priced. And a lot of armies, they don't have a lot of options, especially I'm playing in the league at the moment with the papal army with Norman allies, and I don't have anything in the middle in terms of cav. I've either got knights, or I think I've got access to 1 Javelin Horse. I haven't got any mounted crossbowmen, I haven't got any sergeants, I haven't got any light lancers or anything like that. So one thing I've noticed playing in the league is you don't always need the best cavalry. And what I mean by that is, even if you've got a couple of units, say for example, there's an enemy knight unit, they cost 72, and yet the 2 of these don't cost that much more, you know. So be 78. You're only paying 6 more, and yet you've got 2 units, and then there's no match, because you know you can just get the flank. If he engages one of the units, you'll just get the flank. So a lot of the time in this game, it's not just about quality, it's about the amount of units that you can bring to bear in one particular area. And a good example of being able to do that is units that are fast, which these units are, and cheap. So you can move quickly, and you can add Javelin Horse with them. They can move quickly en masse and threaten a flank or a particular area of the battlefield very quickly, and with a good quantity of units. And something like knights and quite a lot of cavalry, they're not so maneuverable, so you have an advantage there as well with turning and pursuing and so on. There are different types as well, and you know, these are like the upgraded Javelin Horse. In the Lithuanian list, you've got these, and they're swordsmen as well, so these type of units are great as well. I'm going to include in the kind of light horse category, but these are lancers, so they're just that much better. And there are also light lancers, the Bedu light lancers, that you can have access to, and they are 34, so they're a little bit cheaper than these, but they're average and protected, so these units are above average, but they're a great buy as well. So any of the light lancers, I would say, are well worth buying. They're just great for using in conjunction with heavy cavalry, great for threatening flanks, great for locking down infantry. The lancers mean they'll bounce out of melee, a nightmare to fight. You know, often units will just have fairly expensive cav, and so what you're going to do, you're just going to charge after these units when your cavalry, whether it's the best equipped or knights or something, they cost, you know, 56, 60, 70, whereas these only cost 39. So sometimes you've got a difficult choice whether to engage them and then waste your points chasing these kind of units, or to try to ignore them, but then they'll just keep coming around, annoying you, getting flank attacks. So they're a great buy, and I've put them at 2, and I think they're worthy units for being included at 2. Let me know what you think. And here we are, and we are going to do the number 1 unit, according to me, in Medieval Field of Glory 2, and they are going to be the Dismounted Knights. The Dismounted Knights, in my opinion, when you factor in value for money, factor in quality, you factor in how well they do in the battlefield, from what I've seen, Dismounted Knights are a great buy. And generally speaking, in most armies, this is a medium-sized army, I would take maybe 3, and then I've got some Mounted Knights as well. The German lists, I've got them, and they are very effective, and I'm sure some of you will agree, maybe most of you will agree, but they cost 78, they're superior quality, they're heavily armoured, whereas and the Mounted Knights are as well, they're heavily armoured, okay, but against a lot of infantry, because whereas most armies, or many armies, will have knights, so often knights will be fighting knights, or there's that, at least that possibility, there's not so many lists that have these knights, the heavily armoured knights, and So up against Spearmen, Armoured Spear, Defensive Spear, Offensive Spear, even the large, something like Scottish Spear, they are just gonna, more often than not, they will crush units. Because they've got great quality, they've got heavy weapon as well. They're just going to have a strong POA advantage against almost anything they meet in terms of infantry. So you chuck a general in as well, and they're just like tanks. They are great. And as you can see, even though I've got 3 of them, I've still managed to bring some Mounted Knights and a whole array of Crossbowmen and Spear. So they're a great buy. They really are. And maybe some people would even just take out a Mounted Knight and add another one. I mean, going up against, this is just a random Castilian army. They have no knights, just got a lot of spear, raw spear, armoured spear. They've got some Mounted Knights, but there's not going to be much that are going to stop these guys. Probably, if I'm honest, probably they should cost a little bit more. Maybe they should be 80, 82. I don't think I have much of a problem with the Mounted Knights. I think they're about right. 72 is a fair price, because as I said, they're very hit and miss. Sometimes they do great, sometimes not. But these guys are they're just going to grind through and smash most enemy infantry units. So without a doubt, they're number 1 in the game at the moment. We have a new DLC coming out. Maybe we'll see some new units, or some kind of units that can counter them. There's also the earlier versions. I have in the league at the moment, I'm using Norman allies, and the Anglo-Norman lists have the early Dismounted Knights, and they cost 69, and they are superior quality, so the same as this version, but armoured, not heavily armoured. And some of them have spear and others heavy weapon. But they're still a good buy as well, but probably not as good as these units, because these are just, they've got everything to their advantage with the armor, POA, quality, heavy weapon. They've just got it all. But in the Norman lists, and maybe a few of the other lists where you can get the early Dismounted Knights, they're still worth buying as well. Okay, so what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. I will give some honourable mentions to a few units. This is quite difficult, making a top 10. There's probably a few units you're saying, well, why didn't I include this unit or that unit? I had down as a unit that I was going to include in my top 10 the Expert Armoured Horse Archers. They cost 56, superior quality, armoured. They are a really good buy. I could have squeezed them in. I'll be honest, I don't use cavalry armies so much. I guess I prefer more infantry based armies. So the Expert Armoured Horse Archers would be more in the Mongol lists, and a few of the other Asian lists. But when I've played against them, they've been tough, because they've got the bow, they can do damage with the bow, and they're also superior quality and armoured units as well. So they are a great unit. Scots Highlanders, they cost 47. They're impact foot. They've got a bow as well. So there's not many units like that really that are impact foot and they have a bow. So 47 in the Scottish list. they're a very good buy. I had them down as possibly being in my top 10, but they didn't quite make it. They do have because they're essentially medium foot, they have to take a modifier against heavy infantry, negative modifier, but they're still a really good unit. Mounted crossbowmen as well at 36. A lot of cavalry don't do well against arrows, so especially if you've got a couple of mounted crossbowmen, they can, and from mid-game on, especially as units start losing men, they can be really effective against cavalry. So that's another one of the units that I could have included in the top 10, but they didn't quite make it. But overall, I think I've done a decent list. Maybe you disagree, maybe you'd switch it around a bit, let me know. But that is the top 10 as things stand now. And I'm going to do a top 10 list for Ancients as well. And I might also update this list when the DLC comes out and I played it. So maybe in September or something, October, I might do an updated list. Okay, thanks for watching.